Jesus is going to go up to Jerusalem. He's going to go and encounter some of the laborers. And what are they going to do with him? They're going to treat him badly. Is anyone getting there with me, or just before me, or just after me? If I ask you now for a parable that makes it sound like, which parable is it?
The owner of the vineyard.
And the tenants. And what does he do? What do they do to it? They do something to someone of the owner of the vineyard. What is it that happens?
They killed
the son.
Yeah.
They kill the son.
Is that not starting to sound like a like these authors of this gospel are on a mission? Is anyone starting to see that this is a planned
similarity
got going here? I'm hoping that the picture's falling into place, that you're seeing this political thing that's happening here, and that you're seeing who the players are. Obviously, for this session, we are focusing our attention on the Sadducees particularly, and there's a reason why, which is going to become apparent soon. John, I think I've got another, at least just one. I don't know if there's two, but let's go to this one. Matthew 17. Sorry, no, wait, this can't be right. Sorry, I think I'm on the wrong one. John, actually read, you see, this is going to be a tough one. I want to say read on here because I don't think I've got the right reference.
Okay.
So your Sadducees were and remember who they were. They were pretenders to that position. In fact, I might even go so far as to say they might not all have been Jewish even. There was such insane corruption in that temple during Jesus' day that it was, that's why he could rightfully throw a tantrum in the temple. So it was messed up. It was bad.
So Darren, I haven't done much research into this, but the apostles themselves, the original apostles, so when they were found in the Galilee area, would they naturally have, from their parents, obviously been taught from a young age and grown up, they would have taken Pharisaical views rather than the Sadducees or the Essenes?
Oh, very much, very much.
And that would explain also why they would write the way they do, angled from a Pharisaical viewpoint.
Yeah, remember the Pharisees.
Highlighting more.
Yeah, the Pharisees were the guys that were in the midst of the community. So the Pharisee could be the guy working out in the field next to you, the carpenter next to you. But he's also the guy that's teaching in the synagogue.
Yeah. And I think one thing that also people forget is that it was some of the Pharisees that actually silently accepted Yeshua as the Messiah.
Without
They just
question.
didn't outwardly.
No, without question. Now, even still, I still think the main thing is Rome had the power to kill Jesus, which they did. The Sadducees unquestionably, obviously, egged that on. But ultimately, who does Paul claim was killing Jesus? And that's the ultimate point from an antagonistic side. The powers of darkness. And the point is, it's not fair to say Jews killed Jesus. That's my point. And then, of course, Jesus himself claims to have laid down his life. So, but we'll get into that, I think, for Passover again. My goal again for tonight was to show that that parable has undertones of Chanukkah, because if it's gunning at the Sadducees, it's a Chanukkah story, because the Sadducees are offspring of the Hasmonean period that leads into the first century situation that Jesus is born into. And here's the funny thing with it too. I've told you in the previous, or the 2 weeks ago, showed you the layout of how Herod destroys the last of the Hasmoneans. And ironically, Jesus then talks and explains the last of the Hasmoneans' puppy, the Sadducees, how they get destroyed. He said it. This tree will never bear fruit again. Didn't that prove true? Sadducees are gone. So I think that makes Jesus a pretty accurate prophet. And I think that with that, I am officially done. So let's get who's on here. Let's just follow this pattern here of what we've got here. Okay, Kathy, you're top on the list.
Well, thank you, Darren, for all your research and exposition of it all. It's just amazing and wonderful, and we really benefit from all your research and knowledge, and I really appreciate it. I look forward to it. I'm excited by it, and I've got copious notes again.
Good to you.
And yeah, and I liked your comment, if it's not good news to the Jews, it's not good news to anyone.
Right.
That was, yeah. And these are the sort of things we need to absolutely know in our inner being, really. Oops, sorry, I just disconnected. Thank you again for all of this. There's an amazing amount more than just reading from the passages that you've mentioned.
Right.
I
Yeah.
love the way that you bring out context and the way they're connected to other things. Nothing is in isolation.
No, definitely.
Yeah, and it's so exciting to hear what the connections are, because I myself don't know them necessarily, and we get the benefit of your research, your knowledge, and your passion, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure. Okay, John.
Yeah, no, very interesting. Darren, thanks again. Yeah, just the highlights for me was the separation of the Sadducees and the Pharisees, and how much of a different role they did play.
Yes.
Especially now that even with you pointing out that the Pharisees were more the community people,
Yes.
and the Sadducees were of the temple. And because I always thought that the Pharisees were all part of the temple as well, how they mixed together, I didn't know, but obviously you've made it pretty clear. And I suppose I can sort of see that the Pharisees are sort of I was going to say sort of like a carry on from the community, Jewish community groups that were coming from, even from Persia.
Very much.
And I've just, yeah, and so it's good. I'm just learning a lot. I'd like to, again, just go over some of it again. I'm still trying to get my head around. I'm just seeing this picture of when they were condemning Jesus and where Jesus was put before Pontius Pilate, and they all were all yelling out, "Crucify him!" And in my mind, I still see the Sadducees, all the religious people, Pharisees, Sadducees, but you're sort of saying that it was not so much the Pharisees, it was more the Sadducees that were
Oh, yes.
bidding the crucify Jesus. Yeah. Is that right? Is that what I'm saying?
And you know, John, what we'll do,
Mm.
remind me if I don't, if you're still with us when it comes time for Passover, which is literally just a few months away, we can
Oh,
revisit
I'd love to. No, I
the
want to be part of that.
context,
Mm.
the context of what happens at Pilate's portico. And when you see the context of it, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised and shocked at what
Yeah.
is unfortunately overlooked by Christians. But again, it's just the unfortunate heritage of Christianity, which is very anti-Semitic, not intentionally, but just by inheritance, unfortunately.
Evolution.
Yeah, so you'll see. But I mean, we'll get to that and give it proper attention. And then
Mm.
you can judge for yourself, actually. I'll put the evidence in front of you, and
Mm.
then you'll be able to decide for yourself.
Mm. Mm. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Very much appreciate your input and all the work you've done, Darren. You've done, yeah. So thank you. All right,
Right.
I'm off. Thank you.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks, man. Okay, Gary.
Yeah, very good. Like I said, I'm doing a study on the kingdom, and oh my goodness, we we have no clue of how the vast chasm there is between what traditional Christianity believes the kingdom to be and what the real kingdom is, or the gospel, and sort of ties in a little bit for me with it. But interesting fact about the Pharisees, again, when, like you said, after Jesus curses the fig tree, you look in that generation, after that, there was no Sadducees, there's no Essenes. They sort of just was. But then we have proof of the Pharisees carrying on. I mean, you look at Paul's writings, Paul even goes into great detail. He actually boasts about being a Pharisee.
Exactly.
And it's not in a negative sense. He actually boasts about being a Pharisee of Pharisees. There's a cloud of that. So even after Yeshua, we have clear evidence there's still the Pharisaical movement still carried on.
Without question, yeah.
Obviously Paul was aligning that with the messianic, context, but it wasn't dead. It wasn't bad. It wasn't a swear word. Yeah. That was really good. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Let's finish up in New Zealand. Dad, you still there?
Yes, Darren. Darren, just looking back on the thing, didn't Jesus accuse the Pharisees of being whitewashed sepulchres, or was he talking to the Sadducees there?
Now, it could be the Pharisees, because the implication would then be that they are hypocrites, which is fine to say, because if they were putting burdens on people that they weren't willing to bear themselves, then that's a fair judgment on them. But
so while I'm saying that, and even my own judgment, when you're looking for somebody to blame, it was easy to reference back to that, and maybe that's at the root of most of the anti school of thinking against the Pharisees and seeing them as the ones who crucified Jesus. But then, as you were saying in your study, if you didn't know the Asmonean background, and it's all forming a picture in my mind now, and the Sadducee involvement in the Sanhedrin at the time, and the Hellenistic and Herod influence, then you could easily make the mistake that Mel Gibson did and blame the death of Jesus on the Jews through the Passion of the Christ.
Yeah.
So it all makes sense to me in that way. Then, if you look at it all together,
Let's take the example of what happened in this week. I suggested that some people are launching and getting a pineapple stuck in their backside. If some orb person on the street read that, what would they assume? Would they assume I like these people or I hate these people I'm referencing?
yeah,
Probably sound like I hate them.
yeah,
But in fact,
It's
it's
almost like
quite the opposite.
it. Sorry, guys. It's almost like I just got this vision in my mind. It's almost like at seminary, or since the 2nd, 3rd century, there's been like this flow chart that has been passed down, and the flow chart goes: if a Jew, or if a Pharisee, or something like, if a Jew equals non Jesus or whatever, Pharisee equals this, then he must be a Jew. If a Jew equals this, he must be a Pharisee. So basically, anything to do with any part of pre-Jesus or whatever, you are a Pharisee. And I think this has been the terrible cancer that has been passed down
yes.
through the ages. And it's you almost have to then claw your way through all that crap before you can start bringing context,
Right.
because it's so ingrained that anything you say about a Pharisee or the prophets or the law, the baby has been thrown out with the bathwater.
You know what?
You
Nandi has seen this for himself more than once. And it sounds arrogant what I'm about to say. But for me to sit and discuss or debate biblical issues with a Christian is an unfair fight. They are in over their head. And you know what? They're not even in over their head because I know so much. You know why they're in over their head? Because they know so little. That's actually what does them in firstly. And this is what you talk, the ignorance is embarrassing. Or at least it should be embarrassing. And it's partially based on like what you've just said. It's total ignorance. And I'm not even saying they're doing it intentionally. They just inherited stupid logic. Now you can fix bad education, but you can't force someone to fix their prideful attitude about their bad education. That's I mean, I put out that challenge with my pineapple analogy. Did you see anyone new that's on the group joining us tonight, Gary?
Yeah, no, it's as you say, very, very. A lot of it's got to do with pride, and
Oh, very much. I won't do it. I won't do this, but I could label for you the people on that group who that problem is exactly the problem for right now. I won't do it, but I'm just saying I can because I know. So it is exactly that.
I mean, I've been reading some of what the church fathers have got to say about the Messianic age, and it is frankly quite shocking, to say the least. It's beyond. And like you said earlier, the irony in all of this is the fact that the very same label that is given today to a knee-jerk reaction to Pharisees. Oh, you're a Pharisee. You've got your Pharisaical thoughts, and you know, or Pharisee spirit in you. Is strangely enough what they are commenting, and the church fathers are commenting, I could equally apply, if not worse, labels on them, almost in an anti-Pharisaical view, because it's actually a false view on
It's a very
doctrine.
big problem. No, it's a serious problem.
Yeah.
Okay, is that it? Have you got anything else?
No, that's it for me.
Yeah. So we're into PE. Janet.
Thanks, Darren. It was an incredible lesson. I think I have to echo everything that Kathy said. Your knowledge absolutely amazes me. But I think the one thing that I can take from this tonight was the they. I've often wondered who the they were
Good.
in Matthew. And one can get terribly confused. I'd like to just ask you something. There are a couple of passages where I suppose it depends on the translation that you're reading, but they talk about the scribes and the Pharisees. Now, who were the scribes?
So the scribes would be look, you had scribes for, I'd say in this order, you had probably had scribes firstly for the Sadducees, then I'd say for the Essenes, and lastly for the Pharisees. I'd say the Pharisees scribes come in post temple destruction, because that's where you get your Babylonian and Jerusalem Talmuds from.
Okay.
So remember, not everyone is capable of reading and writing perfectly. So
Yes.
your scribes are going to be your very well educated scholars.
And as you say, they could have belonged to all of the parties, basically.
Right.
Simply.
I'm inclined to say they're probably more closely related in that sense to the Sadducees more. And you find them often noted as being with them. So that would be my sort of
definition,
yeah.
Talking about this sort of inaccurate view that the Christian community have on the Pharisees, I think that it has a lot to do with, and I cannot quote the scripture perfectly, and I don't even know where it is, but when Jesus said that unless your righteousness exceeds that of the Pharisees, you will not see the kingdom of heaven. And that, I want to tell you, is the one verse that the Christians hang on to.
Oh,
This
yeah.
automatically puts the Pharisees in that horrendous light for them. And they see the Pharisees as being hypocritical. But was it not Nicodemus, who in fact was a Pharisee and was a total believer? Was it Nicodemus?
Yes, there was a lot. Joseph of Arimathea as well.
Yes, Joseph. He's the one that got the body eventually of Jesus.
Yes.
Yeah. So therein lies, and as Gary himself said, I mean, if you just take the teachers of today, wow, I would say that there are a mountain of them that are hypocritical Pharisees or equal to them. But they, of course, will never see that for themselves. You know what I mean?
It is an absolute pride issue. It's.
But Darren, it was a great lesson. Thank you very much. And I certainly didn't take offense to. In fact, I had a giggle about the pineapple.
I thought you might have.
Thanks very much, Darren.
Okay. Last but not least, Nande, are you still with us? Or have you fallen out the second story window?
Oh no, I'm just missing Janet so much after that comment about pineapples.
I miss you too.
I'm glad to hear it. On that, I think also I was just reading, I think it was a few weeks back, I was reading the book, what's the book? Where you quote where actually it's the Pharisees that warn Jesus that Herod is trying to kill him. And he needs to be careful.
Yes, they tell him to cut Herod's after him.
Yeah, so again, that adds to Janet's list of Pharisees that actually have a very positive light in the gospel. Okay, I'm just trying to get my questions again. Yeah, so I think you answered this in the whole teaching, but basically what I'm getting is the Pharisees unlike the Sadducees, were they calling for the kingship to return back to the Davidic line? Were they pushing that, or was that more of a, guys, we shouldn't have a king unless it's from the line of David?
Oh, absolutely, they would have that attitude. That think of the Pharisees as kind of like, how do I put this? Think of it like a car's stuck on the side of the road and there's a flat tire and you don't have a jack. So a group of Pharisees run up and they say, okay, on the count of 3, we're going to lift up the side of the car. You need to get the wheel on as quick as you can because we can't hold forever. Think of
Yes.
them as those guys that are like just keeping things going. Let's not screw this up so bad that what the prophet said come to pass and we don't get to see the Messiah. So they're just trying to keep the story together and want to see the Messiah return so that they can step out the way for him. This is why when rabbis argue and they can't get to a point, eventually they'll say, when Messiah comes. In other words, you know what? We're going to come back here. We're going to argue again about this tomorrow because we must argue about it. That's the thing that Christians don't get. That's what Jewish rabbis do. If you're not discussing and debating it, like I said to you, Nanda, when I spoke to Damien and he's reading my book, I literally said to Damien, I'm going to be disappointed if you agree with everything.
Yeah, I remember you saying
that. So, and Christians don't get that. Do you see? They don't have that. They don't have that. That wrestling.
I remember either when I listen to like One for Israel, if they have a rabbi specifically, usually it's usually everyday Jews, but even non-messianic rabbis or scholars, but that are like who grew up in Judaism, non-messianic Judaism, so Reform, anything like that. They, again, I think even your friend, I think his name is Emery, I can't remember.
Omri, yeah.
Omri. All of them say the same thing. Omri doesn't spell it out so much, but it's basically, my word, it's like blatantly clear that Jesus is a Pharisee. Like it's so glaring to them, to any Jew or who's a scholar or rabbi. Like the lady who you made me listen to with the 2 former Christian pastors,
right.
where she's like, it's he ticks all the boxes. He's always talking to Pharisees. He's arguing with them. He's talking about extra biblical stuff, and he's giving rulings. That's a Pharisee 101, just clear as day.
Let's give an example, Nande, that we don't need names for this, but you can confirm or deny this for everyone that's either listening live or going to listen to the recording. Mm-hmm. You can just answer with a yes or a no. Have you ever seen me in the company of yourself and some of your friends that you care about and wanted to see on getting insight into this and getting onto this? Have you ever seen me gun them and kind of challenge them intensely in your company?
Yeah, I have.
Okay. Even to the point of possibly insulting, right? Like it looks insulting what I'm saying. Have you seen that?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. And when they have not responded at all to that, and I've told you, I'm just going to forget they even exist. Have I stuck to that promise?
Yep. I'm the one that brings it up more than anything.
So the funny thing is, when you're caring about someone, you fight with them.
That's true.
It's when you stop fighting with them that they should worry.
And that's where and I think what your dad said, which is going to my second question, Jesus would be a Pharisee, but what he had issues with them, like I think I love the car analogy he used, picking up the car analogies. It's the hedge, I think you call them hedge laws or hedge rulings.
Yes.
That caused a whole subsection of common Jews to become what is now known as sinners in
Right.
the testimonies, and that's where he starts disagreeing with his own group. He identifies with them, but he would disagree, and it's amazing because that the famous verse that's loved by Christians, my yoke is light, is actually Jesus trying to say it's a fact. He's arguing with his fellow
Pharisee.
party,
Yeah.
fellow party members, saying you guys are doing good, but this is where you've actually messed up a bit.
Yeah, but that's what it is.
And then this is one more question I have left. Well, two more actually. Maybe you're going to touch on this in another time, but the two biggest groups are kind of Matthew. Matthew's it would seem, because the Sadducees probably did have Levites, but wouldn't the Essenes and the Sadducees be the ones that hate each other the most, seeing that they're both Levites, and the Essenes kind of like abandoned completely the whole temple, and they were also founded by Levites, like John is a Levite and he's at the Essenes.
I think, as you find in any kind of sect, there's different levels of people's intensity in it. And that's why I make that statement. You can be a good Christian, a good Muslim, a good Catholic, a good whatever, and you can be a bad one too. And being a bad one is when you start questioning the tenets of what they believe. So I think you're going to find variations of that, all over the place. You had Peter that was a good zealot. Like,
Yes.
he wanted to kill.
Judas was also a zealot, if I'm not mistaken. Also.
Yeah. So, you've got that. So I'm telling you, it was messy. So they were all over the place with each other all the time. And isn't that the reason why Jesus comes and speaks so often about loving and serving? Because everyone's clamoring to get to the top.
Yeah. I find it also hilarious, and this could be theory. Matthew, who would be your uncle and the most book we've stuck on, was a tax collector. So maybe he might not have been a Sadducee, but he seemed to be more following with them, and he's the one gunning them in his own book. So he would have probably much more closer understanding, because if I'm not, he was a tax collector, which were hated by
that one of the slides I was going to put on the screen was, is Matthew a Sadducee, or was Matthew a Sadducee? Given the role he played, he could have been a Sadducee that switched over, or he could have been a Sadducee that eventually didn't himself want to be associated officially as a Pharisee or a Sadducee, which is why his tone looks so dangerous in what he writes. Remember, he was a man, he's a human being, so
yeah,
he gets to have an opinion.
It makes sense, because the Pharisees, when Jesus says he must host a meal, the Pharisees are the ones who are upset that Jesus is associating with Matthew. Because I think he's the one that Jesus says he's going to host him now, or host a meal for him when he calls him or something.
Are you thinking of Zacchaeus?
Oh, is that Zacchaeus? Okay, no, that is Zacchaeus. Sorry, it's that movie. That series? I forgot what it's called now. I think The Chosen. They make Matthew the guy who does the dinner thing, which is not true. And then my last question, D. Matthew 24, where Jesus says there will be a Hanukkah part 2, or Deja Vu, as you call it. Is there going to be is he saying also, which obviously the prophecy comes true, but will there be a Hanukkah part 3 in terms of what we read in Revelations also? And what will happen with the third chapter?
I think so, yeah.
But would you say Jesus is only specifically talking about what already has happened, or is he, as some prophets usually do, like even Daniel, talking about what's already happened and what's going to happen with what John is talking about?
Both, yes. Both looking back and into the future, yes.
Okay, so he's talking about what part 2, Hanukkah part 2, and Hanukkah part 3, which will happen just before the millennium, during Jacob's trouble.
I definitely think so.
Okay. Yeah, that was that was all my questions. I had more, but you answered them as you
Okay, great.
you were going along. But it's actually quite sad because this almost seems like I'm also listening to Damien's Got Milk, and a lot of the stuff makes sense because I think I remember at Ling Newton, you went, you actually, I remember you. That's the thing. It's funny because if you sat with us during that when you were talking about the elementary truths, and me and Ina were talking about it now. If some like stranger sat with us, you'd think if you didn't know the context, you don't like us very much because you're actually gunning. Do you guys know the elementary truths? Because this is the
Right.
basics of faith, and I think we spent weeks on that passage, and it's just so fascinating now because now, like Janet says, I don't know who the they was, and I didn't even think to even ask who the they was. The they to me was always, I always thought it was a Christian thing. It's talking to non-believers or the Jews in a whole monolithic way. So adding this backstory, which Matthew doesn't need to spell out because his audience are specifically probably disciples, his own disciples of Jesus who would know very much about this. Hence
Right.
why almost every Jew can read the gospel and even Paul's letters and be like, oh, okay, this is a Pharisee writing. These are Pharisaical writings, and this is very pro-Pharisee.
Exactly.
So yeah, so thanks about that. I'm looking forward to more of this. I think this is my favorite Hanukkah backstory since we've done in a while.
Yeah, this is the most intense, well, not the most intense, really just painting a broad and broader picture. So it has been a nice.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. Maybe it's because I'm a history buff also, so this is really been so great
Yeah.
because I think Gary brings it up, whereas it's you can't Jesus the Pharisees being painted as a bad light, and just how non-messianic Judaism has gone in over the years. You kind of realize that because I read the documents of the Gospels, and in a historical way, people have I think we even said there's more documentation on Jesus' life than even Caesar's.
Oh, yeah.
And if you look at the time during that period, it's amazing that we have the documentation that has survived now, but it makes sense and it sounded kind of like a big how God like used what Satan, because probably Satan and all of them, the target just zoned in when the Messiah took up the Pharisee sect, and probably that's how you get what you have in Christianity. But it ended up helping preserve the scriptures that we have now. So
Right.
it's basically God used thinking that powers that be are winning, but they're actually just playing according to he's just using their own plan against them, which is pretty amazing because now we get to relearn all the stuff and have access to this because of them preserving all of this information.
That's it.
So yeah, thanks, Steve.